Hello, everyone. I hope that you are doing well as we are approaching our final module in the class. This class always goes by really quickly, but especially during the summer, I feel like we start and then all of a sudden it's finished. So before I dig into content, I did want to say very seriously, you have been a very wonderful class. I've really appreciated how dedicated you have been, particularly with the discussion posts and really interacting with one another. I've enjoyed hearing from you and definitely getting to learn from a lot of different and diverse perspectives. So you have done a great job, and I am really looking forward to your special topic presentations this coming week. But before we get into that, I'd like to recap a little bit about creativity. So clearly, you should probably know this by now, but creativity is pretty much my favorite topic. I'm very passionate about it and have a lot of experience working with Centers for Creativity. So it's difficult to condense creativity into 1 week for this course. But it's always a good challenge to give you a good overview and hopefully spark your interest for learning more about creativity research and how we apply that to the classroom. So this case study is, again, as all the case studies are, quite real world. Gifted students are often pretty terrified by creative problem solving. I think that is for a lot of different reasons, but I did want to walk through a couple of ideas, both from some personal research and also want to draw on some of your discussion posts about why it is that creativity can be so overwhelming. So just to recap, we have Veronica. She's got this great creative problem solving activity going on where students are working in small groups and they're passing around a pillowcase and they're taking out items and creating something magical, and then they are doing a writing assignment based on their magical item. From the outside looking in, that sounds super fun, right? Like we're going to do something new, we're going to think outside of the box, it's going to be really fun. But oftentimes, our most talented and gifted students are very product oriented, and they often even have a fixed mindset. So they think, I am not creative or I am not good enough for this. So with creativity, we really need to provide a lot of scaffolding and help our students see the importance of creative problem solving and also guide them in creative problem solving. This is a pretty common occurrence where we are really heavy into our content and we're teaching and we're really focused, and maybe we hear a podcast about creativity or we read an article and all of a sudden we're super inspired and say, I'm going to do something creative this week. Or we've just finished our units, we have a little bit of extra time, let's do creative problem solving. A lot of the consulting that I've done, I've seen creativity as something, quote, extra. It's just added on at the end of a lesson or oftentimes at the end of the year when we have more time at certain years, of course. Creativity is often seen as something extra, and because of that, students very rarely get continual practice with creative problem solving. So if we think from the student's perspective, especially if they are in an honors course, all of a sudden they come into school one day and instead of a very neat rubric that tells them exactly what is expected, their teacher, Veronica, gives them this really open-ended project. And it sounds fun, but without the appropriate scaffolding, it's actually pretty intimidating. So that's one of the biggest issues I see in terms of creativity and education is it's either all or nothing. So we either say we're going to do one creative lesson a month, or we're going to do one creative lesson a semester or a unit, but we're not going to use creativity in the other lessons. Because of that, when we ask our students to think creatively, they get pretty overwhelmed. So one of the most important things we can do to support creativity is to actually support it and use it throughout pretty much every single lesson. That may sound crazy, but if you've read about the incubation model of teaching, which you all should have, you will see that we can intertwine creativity with content. So it's not like you've got your lesson plan and you add another column and it says creativity. Really what creativity should be is that we are intertwining creativity throughout all of our content. Just to recap, we can think of creativity in terms of 4 P's. We can think of the creative process, the creative product, the creative press or environment, and also the creative person or personality. Typically in education, and I think it was Leslie who pointed this out in her discussion post, we often are tempted to think in product. So we have lots of biases in creativity. One of the most common is an artistic bias. So I have several students who think, I can't be creative because I'm not artistic. I can't draw, I can't paint. And that's a very product-oriented method of thinking about creativity. So one of the most important things we can do in terms of supporting creativity is supporting also the creative process and providing a lot of different scaffolding. We can also create a more supportive environment, creating that environment or press that supports creativity, and also looking at those different personality characteristics. So I want you to leave this module remembering that creativity is more than a product. It is also a process, it is also the environment, it is also the personality characteristics. Very common in education, we focus just on the product, and because of that, our students get this very end goal mindset, and they just want to get the end right rather than really focusing on the process. This is often drawn back, if you're familiar with the research on mindset, to having a very fixed mindset. So we don't really think that we can improve in a process. We just are fixed in our ways and think that there's no way that we can improve and learn. So when we consider how to solve this problem, I wanted to highlight a couple of different things. The first is that we need to really emphasize the real-world importance of creativity. So this is not like once a unit or once a year or when we have time we talk about creativity. There are ways to highlight creative problem solving within every different content area. So you can talk about the creative process of poetry writing. You can talk about the creative process of scientific discoveries. You can talk about the creativity that is required to be a historical figure and to consider the diverse viewpoints of different individuals. So it's really important as the teacher that we are continually talking about creativity, so it's not this up in the sky idea. So the first is give these real world examples of creative individuals, creative processes, or creative products. It's not bad to focus on product as long as we talk about the other P's as well. And also teaching what creativity is. So I just finished teaching a STEM camp, and as part of that STEM camp, we talked about different creative thinking skills. So I told them, hey, we can all be creative. We all have creative potential. We just need to practice it, just like I can become stronger if I go to the gym. You can develop your creative potential if you are practicing these creative thinking skills. So my students, we've talked about fluency, which, as you've read, is how many ideas you can think of. So for example, we did a lot of different warm-up strategies with fluency, and I passed around a pen, and we passed it in a circle over and over again, and we thought of as many different ideas as possible as what this pen could be, and that's a way to practice fluency. Okay, that's not necessarily related to content, but you can easily relate fluency to content. You can talk about what are the reasons why the U.S. would enter a certain war. List as many reasons as possible. That is fluency. List as many different ways to solve this math problem as possible. That is fluency. Okay, so you can directly relate any of these creative thinking skills like fluency back to the content area. Another one that we focused on in the camp I just finished was originality. So after we did the activity of passing the pen, which was actually a ball, around in the circle, then we talked about this time we want you to think of an idea that no one else will think of, and we'll pass it around and do it again. So we talk about the importance of thinking of new and original ideas. Okay, so the key to that is, number one, talking about what creativity actually is, even giving some terminology to it, and connecting it to the content. So creativity is not, okay, we've got 5 minutes before the bell rings, let's do this random thing. It's okay, we're introducing a new content or new concept in our content. Let's use a creative problem solving strategy like fluency, like originality to start students thinking, and then let's relate it to the content. So the key is not to keep creativity unrelated to content. The second thing I wanted to emphasize, besides that real world importance of creativity, is establishing a creative environment. So this is focused more on press. Several of you mentioned this in your discussion post. Tiffany talked about helping the students see that they need to create without the pressure of being right or wrong. So when we give our students the opportunity to do these creative problem-solving projects, we have to make sure they understand, the importance of it, but also that they understand they are free to make mistakes. So one of the important things in this case is to provide choice. So students have different interests. We differentiate for choice or for learner profile as it is, and for learning interests. And one way to support creativity is giving students a little bit of flexibility in how they may want to communicate their learning. Also giving students the opportunity to incubate, which is our fancy word, to dwell on a problem, to think about a problem, providing more long-term projects. My mom, who's a K-4 teacher, she has a pizza box for every one of her students, and she tells the students on day one, you can put anything in this box and I will never touch it. This is your box. You can add to things, you can take things away, but you don't ever have to clean up anything in this box. And it gives the students the ability to work long term on something and to incubate on it. So you can address that in higher level content as well. So if you're doing teaching an English class, you can have one unit where you're talking about poetry and you're working on some sort of poetry project. Then take that poem that the student wrote, have them elaborate on it, use it differently, and somehow adapt that to be more of an opinion piece. Then you can maybe adapt that and relate it to a novel that you read. So anytime that we are using similar ideas in different ways, we'll also provide that environment that allows students to be more flexible. You also want to encourage risk-taking, encourage originality. A lot of students have original ideas, but they are at times afraid to say them. So I'm a big fan of doing anonymous work. I use a lot of technological tools. If you use things like Poll Everywhere, where students can even text in their responses. You can go old school and have a question box or an idea box. Even working in smaller groups at times and then working up to a large group helps build that risk-taking and comfortable environment where they realize there's not a right and a wrong answer. I did want to kind of play the devil's advocate that when we create this kind of press and environment for creativity, we also want to be encouraging discretion so our students know when it's appropriate to think of somewhat crazy ideas and when it may not be appropriate. So when we are, for example, solving a math problem, we can think of lots of new ideas about how to solve the problem, but there is one answer. If we are doing a fire drill, not the time to be creative. If we're doing a fire drill, the time is to follow directions very particularly. One of my mentors in creativity research actually got a phone call from Delta recently, and they said, we want our pilots to be more creative. What can you do for us? And she kind of laughed and she said, I don't want my pilot to be super creative. They're in the air. I want them to get me down safely. So discretion is equally as important. So helping the students see when creativity is a good idea, but also at times, particularly safety issues, we don't want to get too creative with that. The last thing that I wanted to emphasize is the importance of scaffolding. So think of Veronica. She's got this really awesome project that the students are working on. However, the problem is that they haven't had a lot of practice with this. So again, the creativity is not this once a unit activity. This is something they need a lot of practicing with. And again, several of you mentioned this in your discussion post, saying maybe the students should start with more instruction and Veronica can lead a brainstorming activity and help them get started with their ideas, or Veronica can go around group to group and help them make a plan. All of that is really important. That's actually why I wanted to do these creativity how-to guides. So just glancing at some of the different topics we have students who are working on role play. We have students looking at storyboarding, using Scamper, which is a pretty common and such a good creative thinking strategy if you're not familiar with that. Students looking into STEM projects, even escape rooms. All of these are creativity teaching strategies, and they'll provide that scaffolding. So we don't expect our students just to know how to do math problems. We guide them, and then we eventually fade all of that support. And the same thing works with creativity. So you need to help them understand, think of lots of different ideas, think of lots of new ideas, elaborate on your ideas. So providing that scaffolding is important. And in terms of this case study, it seems that Veronica has a great idea, but she's not really providing the appropriate support for her students to get there. So that's a recap on creativity. Again, great topic. There's so much research to be done with that. And one that I think is extremely important. I'm actually more interested in creativity in higher education, but it's always fun to have some of my elementary school teachers in these classes because they just remind me of all the fun that we can have with creativity with younger students as well. Some gifted education services, particularly like enrichment type services, offer a lot of creative problem-solving programs. So if you are not familiar with them, such as Odyssey of the Mind or Destination Imagination, future problem solving, those are all wonderful activities that would support creative problem solving. So the last thing I want to talk about is our final assignment. So for this week, you are going to be completing a special topics presentation. This class is fast. I told you at the beginning of the course, there's just so much information and there's so much more I wish I could say, but that's the purpose of an introductory course, is to get you excited and get you interested. So for this week, you have all week to do some independent research. You can choose whatever topic you want to as long as it's related to gifted education. There's no limit on how many students can choose the same topic, because I think it's really important that you choose something you're interested in. So what you're going to do is this week you will be exploring a content or topic rather of your choice. And if you look in Learning Module 7, is which we're on, you can see the full description of this assignment. But within your presentation, which will be in the form of a PowerPoint, unless you want to do something else, of course, let me know. I want you to give me a brief description of what your topic is. So maybe you are interested in looking deeper into twice exceptional students, or you want to look at special populations. I had a lot of really good projects on African American gifted students last semester. Or maybe there's a particular content and creativity you want to explore. Basically, the world is yours. So you start with a description of what your topic is. Then give me a personal account of why you're interested in this. I've always want to know your personal interests because that's important in terms of that motivation. Talk about how this topic is related to gifted and talented education. Give some practical suggestions related to this topic. So if you're talking about twice exceptional learners, talk about how we can better serve those students. If we're talking about students who are African American, then maybe talk about some of their unique needs and unique strengths and how we can capitalize on those strengths in the classroom. And then lastly, provide a list of top names and some of the major research that's going on related to your topic, and then some further resources and of course your citations. All of that, as always, is explained in your learning module, but I wanted to give you a brief overview. So just to clarify, this next week you have the entire week to work on your special topic presentation. So there is no discussion post that will be due this week. I do want you by, looking for my dates, okay, Wednesday, the 25th of July, I want you to tell me what topic you are doing. All you need to do is say, hey, Dr. Kat, I really want to research gifted education and poverty. And just tell me what you're thinking. That way I have an idea of where we're going. And then by Sunday the 29th, you need to upload your presentation. Again, you're uploading to more of a discussion post this time, and that's because it will give you the opportunity to look at each other's presentations. When you do upload on Sunday the 29th, make sure that you clearly label your project. So don't just write your name, special topics. You want to write Catalana Twice Exceptional Students. So that way your other classmates can know what your project was on. So by the 25th, I need your topic. By the 29th, you are submitting your actual presentation. And then the week following, we will do some investigating of each other's research. So that is all for this week. Again, just to reiterate, no discussion posts this week. You're pretty much on your own in terms of what content you want to explore and looking at all of your different areas of research. I do want you to be careful when you do independent research. Make sure you're looking closely at your sources. Who are you citing? Do they seem reputable? Are they people that you feel comfortable citing? Make sure that you are looking into scholarly research and not just anything online. So if you have any questions or concerns, I'm always here to help, and I'm looking forward to looking at these special topics and seeing what you guys are interested in. You have been a wonderful class, and I will touch base next week. Thanks.